All right, everyone. It's good to see you. Welcome to another wholesome video where Meg and I feel like I should say wholesome, um, manifest it, right? So that we don't talk about things that,
It's gonna be nice.
we're usually, all right, Meg, we have recently had the privilege of being a part of some advisor conversations, what we would call office hours, right? Office hours like case consultations. We've had the privilege of sitting in on some of these recently, and there is a question that sparked the topic for today that has come up, and that's around how to tell clients, we'll say no, right? How to tell them that they can't do something or that's not in their best interest to do something. The thing that they want to do is not going to work. How do advisors approach those conversations? How do they share, if you want to say the bad news, how do they be the bad guy? Tell them they can't do the thing they want to do. I thought we could talk about that today because I think it's really relevant, for all advisors that are out there at some point in their career working with clients. They're going to have to share that with clients.
Yeah, I think regularly. I mean, in the
Probably.
sense that clients are always coming in with an idea, and even in this last office hours, not to give anything away, but there was a client. The client had an idea. The advisor had run the numbers. The numbers were not going to work, or didn't necessarily make sense. And so it was kind of like, you know, I need to tell them no. I'm not even some advisors. I've also been in other conversations where it's kind of like the advisor's like, how do they not know? How does the client have believe in any stretch that like this is okay or that this
Yeah.
is going to be all right, Um, so one, there's clearly a difference between the way clients see their money and the way advisors see their money. There is very much a difference between, what like the way that the advisor thinks about optimization and correct action, which may be different than the way that the client is thinking about optimization and correct action. And I think all of these things sort of come into play. We're also not talking to kids. We're talking to adults about I won't even say problems. Their questions. Actually, that's probably where we should start. All advisors, I would argue, all advisors have had the experience where the client comes in and says, "Hey, guess what? I bought this thing," or "I've decided, that I want to invest in this thing,
Hmm.
so I need $50,000 out of my retirement account." They are not calling you to ask your opinion. They are calling you to tell you that you need to disperse their money to them. It is a very, very different situation when the client calls and actually wants to talk to you. And so even though you know that the answer is no, and that you don't want them to do this, uh, the client doesn't necessarily know that it's no. And or we're sort of making the assumption that hearing no would be a bad thing. Um, it might not. And or certainly how you deliver it, could really help with sort of softening that. So um, yeah, I guess I'll kick it back to you. Where do you want to start? So the situation is client has called. They haven't just done something and told you to give them money. Like they are actively in sort of thinking in like trans theoretical model of change pursuits. They're in contemplation. They're trying to decide. Do I want to do this thing or do I not want to do this thing? And so as the advisor, you have some agency here, you have some power here. There's certainly the dynamics of your relationship and them wanting to talk to you about whatever this thing is, even if it feels like to you perhaps their heart or their mind is already made up. It probably isn't if they're willing to have this conversation. But yeah, but this doesn't mean just go in guns blazing. You got to be nuts. You're kidding me with asking me this. Look at all these other things that you do. Absolutely not. You can't do this. Um, that's a very extreme aversion. I hope that most advisors don't do that. But
Don't do
but we
that.
have those feelings. We have those feelings of like, I can't even believe that that they're asking me this. And sometimes I think maybe that's even what stirs in the advisor, that they're having some big feelings and they're like, ooh, okay, I need to figure out a way to like make these less big feelings so that I can have this conversation and not be disrespectful, not be condescending, not be derogative, maybe not even be fully directional, like, because at the end of the day, as we always say, I think we've said a few times, it's the client's money.
It's not your
If
money. Yeah, it's the
their money,
client's.
if they want to do something, there isn't a whole lot that you can do to stop them. And so this shouldn't be about, I have to change their mind. This shouldn't be about, they have to do it my way or the highway. This shouldn't be about, one opinion versus the other. That I think it can help in terms of preparing for this conversation, to get yourself, the advisor self, in the mindset of, I want to explore where this is coming from, and I want to explore, based on where it's coming from, what some other possibilities might be. So it's not maybe a full blown no, but sort of a, well, maybe this and sort of thing. Um,
I was going to say that this reminds me a lot of in therapy when clients would come in and say that they want to take action and pursue something. And as the therapist, there is would be a large part of me that knows this is a bad idea. Like if we pull back and think about this from a lot of angles, I don't really think that reaching out to your best friend's ex boyfriend and reconnecting, I don't really think that that's going to end well for you.
it could be
Uh,
love. It could be love.
it always, right? That's always it could be, this is the one, right? And that's kind of a silly example, but where I was going is that the goal, so client reaches out and there's this thing that they would like to do with
They think
their money. And the goal here for you as an advisor is not to change their mind. And I think that that's a really important place to start, because when we go into a conversation with the agenda of trying to get them to see something a certain way and change their mind, they can feel that. It comes across in our tone, it comes across in how we justify or explain things. And that doesn't feel good. Clients can pick up on that very quickly. And for any of you, I know I compare and use a lot of parenting metaphors. Like anytime like you do that, like just like with your kids, right? They're like, well, maybe I want to do it anyway. Maybe not, but there could be a little bit of that there. It ultimately, whatever they decide, it still just doesn't feel good for them. It doesn't feel collaborative. So the intention really is in approaching this conversation. Let's first get in that mindset. I love what you said about exploring, right? Because it should be that. It should not be with the goal and intention of, I've got to tell them no and change their mind and convince them that this is a bad idea, and then show and prove and justify why it's a bad idea. That is not going to end well for you as an advisor. Now, doesn't mean that they're going to leave after that conversation, but it will chip away at and erode some of that relational equity that you've built up. The What I think a better mindset is understanding, where is this request coming from? What is behind this? They're asking me for $50,000 so that they can go and, invest in this business, or start this thing up, or purchase this real estate. They're asking for it, but where is that really coming from? Like, what is the goal here? What's the meaning behind it? What's the significance? Like, why is this important to them? And not just why is it important to them, but why now? Like, what is maybe the, I'll say urgency, but what is like behind that? And so sometimes that might mean starting the conversation with, hey, I hear that you want, you asked me about this $50,000, and I'd like to, if it's okay, can we spend a little bit of time just helping me understand like what's important about this to you. I've never heard you talk about this before. This is really interesting. I'd like to know a little bit more just around, what does this mean to you? How is this, going to help you to reach some of your goals? Even you could even dive into a little bit of that. But I think the starting point really needs to be just understanding a little bit more behind the ask, and what's there and why it's important and why now.
Yeah, another along that same line, I'm always usually very curious, like if you got everything out of this that you intended to get out of it, you're putting in this $50,000 investment, you're somehow hoping that in the next few years with this job or whatever thing that you're doing, that you're going to get $200,000 back. Okay, well, what are you going to do with that $200,000? Like, are you going to put that into
Hmm.
your retirement? Is like, or is it a, like what is the point of this injection of cash? Are we going to then take that bigger sum and like do something else? Is this going to be sort of a snowball thing going on? What also I'm usually very curious as to like what is the point of the outcome?
Hmm. Yeah, it's a good.
What are we trying to, because that, to your point, like this, how does this relate to your goals? I think it's that, but now you're trying to talk in specifics about the outcome and what they really intend to do next. Is it just to have more money to invest? And sure, there is like a risk reward thing going on here, but is that the right one that we want to take? Are there other ways, if we're just trying to get this injection of cash, is there other ways to do that that would make more sense at a different time, that would make more sense in a different way? Sometimes reverse engineering, going from whatever we think the end is going to be, then back to the beginning. There may be other ways to get there. Um, Another thing that comes up for me, and something that I think about, I think almost any time I have to go into a conversation where I'm like kind of dreading it in a way, or I'm nervous about it. It feels like there's a lot on the table. Is something that you and I have talked about before. It's just a methodology of ask, tell, ask. I think we actually talked about it on the last one of these we did, and this works so nice because it creates some initial engagement up front. Okay, so you're saying you want this $50,000 to do this thing. Tell me a little bit more about the thing. Tell me what you know about the thing. Tell me, how you learned about the thing. Tell me what you want this thing for. Like, you're asking so that they start talking. And you may even ask, like, what are you worried about?
Mhm.
You haven't pulled the trigger yet. What are you hopeful for? What is it that we're trying to get? You're allowed to play up, really, both sides of their ambivalence. Because all this does, instead of saying this is crazy on this hand, although I understand it on this hand, it lets them sort of express their own ambivalence. Then the tell part becomes, okay, well, we've talked about a lot of things. Would it be helpful for me if we ran a couple of these scenarios together? Or now understanding, what the end looks like, could we go back to the beginning? Or, given all that you've talked about, would you like me to sort of expand on some of my expertise as it relates to tax or as it relates to estate or whatever financial vehicle, something or other? Then you would get the chance to do that, perhaps talk about some of the conclusions that you have come to, that you've sort of decided this isn't the best idea, but since it's sort of going in this method and you sort of asked whether or not you can tell that, they're going to go with it. And then you ask, okay, now with all of this on the table, what what does this mean to you? I think another wonderful thing I learned from you, a while back, is that sometimes you just have to ask outright, is this something that you want to do something about?
Yeah.
Again, they've asked, they've talked about it, but now we've maybe spent 20-30 minutes talking about all these different things. It's okay to ask, do you need to make this decision right now? Was this something that you were just interested in? How do you actually want to move forward? Is it just a matter of giving you this money, that's all you really want? um, and I think probably most clients, because they have brought themselves to your office to talk to you anyway, are likely at that point to be like, well, you know I
I was
kind
just
of
kind
want
of
to
thinking
talk
about
about
it.
it. Yeah. um,
Whoa,
And
I wasn't expecting all of this. Like this was an idea that I was just maybe exploring. Yes, to
yeah,
your point.
yeah,
Clarifying that is incredibly important.
yeah, and it makes them say versus you say no. It makes them say maybe not right now, or
Yeah.
you're giving me extra stuff to think about. Which again then keeps you away from the fear of having to be like, no, this is just a really dumb idea.
So I think that there will likely be a point in this conversation when numbers come up, the technical part. And when I say the technical part, I'm meaning like the impact of, let's just say, the withdrawal. Like the impact of that will come up, and you'll have, your projections, your little toggles, right? That you toggle on and off, and you'll show, all this. Here's what this will mean for taxes, all of that stuff. The impact will come up. And I think that that is really important. It is. It's like clients need to know and understand what that is. During that during that portion of the conversation, as you are likely in your flow state, because that's where most advisors get super excited, right? In that state of
Scenario
flow,
plan. It's
right?
great. It's great.
Nerding out about like all the things. So I think that it is really important as you are walking through some of that to pause periodically. And I would say you should not be talking more than like 3 minutes. I mean, oh my gosh, 5 minutes would be really long, but pausing kind of every, couple of points and asking or even saying, hey, as I'm sharing this, like what thoughts are coming up for you? Like, how is this shaping the way that you're thinking about this decision? And just asking, because if you go on this really long explanation that's like a 20-minute presentation about the impact of this, it's going to overwhelm them. They're not going to synthesize that information in a way that you're probably hoping that they will. And so I think that when you get to the numbers, the impact portion of the conversation, break it down, ask them, how is this landing on you? What thoughts are coming up for you right now? Because it might be 5 minutes into this that they're like, oh, yeah, no, this is a terrible idea. And guess what? You've saved yourselves 15 minutes of not talking about all the things, and wrapping the meeting up. And then, I don't know, maybe going to the bathroom, having lunch, taking care of yourself, right? Like you've given yourself and the client 15 minutes back. So I would say periodically pause, ask, how is this landing on you? What thoughts are coming up for you? Is this shaping the way that you're thinking about this decision? And then proceeding, right? From there. So I want to ask though, Meg, because this is coming up for me. We're talking about a singular decision, a singular request. I have worked with, as I'm sure you have too, where advisors will say, this client continues to ask me for like $10,000, $15,000 like withdrawal increments. Like feels like a lot. And it's for their adult children who need it for this. It's to help with like the business for that, or like this friend like kind of needs this. Like there are multiple like requests. And now things are at a point where it's not doom and gloom, but it's like, hey, this is starting to kind of add up. This is becoming a pattern, what we would call like a behavioral pattern, right? And I think I want to know your thoughts. I think that the approach to that conversation, there's some overlap and a lot of similarities, but it's also a little different than just a one time kind of singular, I say singular, like a one time just kind of like request. But I mean, are you thinking about like, are you thinking that there are some differences there in how you would
Mhm.
approach that? Would you still use ask, tell, ask, even for the behavioral pattern scenario versus like the one time request scenario?
Um, well, I really do like that because it's for me, it's easy to remember. And even when
It's a good
advice,
one.
at least in my experience, advisors that recognize that they're up against a pattern, not just a weird moment, but up against a pattern, can get even more nervous.
For
Like
sure.
because
1000%.
now we're talking about behavior change, not just no, I got to just talk them out of this dumb idea. Like and behavior change is like a whole other thing that like brings up so many other things. And it makes me think a lot about like the clients that will give a lot, whether it's to their kids, whether it's to their friends, whether it's I don't know. Yeah, they will spend money in the name of their relationships, whether they should or not. Whether they say things like, "Well, I want to be able to retire at such and such age," and you're like, "Lady, if you're or man, if you keep spending like this, giving each of your kids 10 grand a month, like you're not going to be able to retire." And it is not that advisors should not ask about that. Like I think advisors 100% are and can ask about that behavior. Hey, you're telling me that you want to retire at such and such age. And it is my job, whether it's comfortable or not. You can fire me after this is done, but I feel that it is incumbent upon me to explain to you or to give you the information so that you can see that this behavior and this goal are going in opposite directions. And then really that's about all you can do, in the sense of especially when it comes to emotional giving, it is very, very hard to get people to stop because you're not asking them, you're asking them to choose between a potential future state, retirement, where
And their child.
well, and if in this future state I'm retired, but I no longer have a relationship with my child, I don't care. I would rather give away all my money and retain this relationship with my kid or my loved one, and that it is social capital and financial capital are both really important things, and sometimes they intersect well and sometimes they don't. And so what becomes important, I think, in these situations is that you as the advisor that you're being told, again, this is not the same as the client coming in and being like, give me $50,000. They're coming in and saying, can I talk about this? In this situation, they're not necessarily, maybe they are calling you to say, give me $15,000 or whatever it is that they're routinely asking for, but they're also not trying to hide it. That they're doing this thing. They know that you're doing this thing or that they're doing this thing. And it is okay to talk about it. It's okay to approach it. And if the ask tell ask helps you to feel like you're not, to approach in that situation, you may say, hey, I've noticed that there's some spending, going on pretty repeatedly, and it wasn't necessarily a part of our budget, and thinking that, this is a meeting about, your retirement projections and things like that. I think it's probably important that we talk about that. And so before we get into the numbers part of it, which we can totally go into, I love that. I just want to ask, how are you feeling about things? What's more important? Is this relationship and what you're getting out of it, or is it trying to hit this retirement number? How do those things intersect for you? How are they different? And just trying to create context for yourself and for them, because they may not be. I mean, I know advisors have a hard time believing that people don't connect these things, but they don't connect these things. Like they're not actively thinking about, all of these trade-offs, simultaneously, especially for these future states that they, have a really hard time understanding. But I feel like in you asking me that, maybe you have a better solution or an additional solution, I should say, for
But I don't know if I would say better. I have some thoughts. I guess I was thinking about it as we were talking because we have had like advice. They're like, well, yeah, but okay, a one-time thing, like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. But like, I need to kind of tell them, no, this isn't working because it's not a one-time thing. It's a repeated like pattern. And so I brought that up because it came up for me of like there's a little bit of a difference there. It is different. And while I think that a lot of the approach or approaches that we've talked about can be used or utilized, I think it's deeper than that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to your point, not that the advisor can't maybe necessarily do anything. I actually think that this could be a great place to bring in support, to connect them with a specialist. This would be a time with the firms that we work with. Like, this is actually probably a time when they bring us in to come and have conversations. I think that, you know, this would apply to kind of the singular, like one off, like requests, but more so in this instance, what I think about is the need for uh, Carl Rogers, not Richards. Um,
We like both Carls. I mean,
we
it's fine.
like both Carls. However, this is Rogers, humanistic psychologist, who talked a lot about unconditional positive regard. And, this is more than just like validating, like, that sounds really hard for you. This is really kind of a moment, I feel like, when bringing that to the relationship, to the interaction, is so necessary, because what you don't want is the client to feel shamed for wanting to take care of and spending this money on, let's just say, their adult children or caring for someone else, at the risk of their own retirement future self. Because, if we're approaching that conversation, we're like, I want to understand more. Oh, okay, it's for your adult children. Well, you're really not going to have enough to sustain your retirement here in like 15 years. Like, clients can experience a lot of shame from that. And so we don't, or guilt, right? Or guilt. Exactly. And that, while I know and believe that's never the intention, we also don't really want to set ourselves up for coming across that way. And so, unconditionally, like, bringing to the table, I'm so glad that you shared. This is really difficult. I can't imagine, um, wanting to caretake for my adult children, but also then being told that, hey, like, this isn't financially sustainable. Like, my goodness, like, what a difficult place for you to be in as a parent. I'm sure this is not the place that you thought that you would be in, when we first started. And I have a lot of, empathy, like, for you. I have a lot of respect. I think that you do a great job trying, there's a lot here that you can verbally, like, give to your client, that and some of the reason why is not to sound like a therapist, because some advisors are like, oh my gosh, that sounds like a therapist. Well, it is a technique that therapists use, but it does not make you a therapist. And the reason, like, why, is because clients are going to then be more likely to come to you and tell you things later
Right.
when they
Right.
feel like there's a level of safety. And that's what you want. Going back to what you said, like, the client is sharing this, they're telling you this, like, through their behavior. It is better to know than to not know as the
Right.
advisor. And
Right.
a strategy, a technique, if you will, conversationally, that can help with that is, giving that unconditional positive regard there, to clients. And I think the last thing that I'll say is reiterating, I think that this, if it's a behavioral pattern, I think that's a really great place to bring in some additional support, because as the advisor, I really don't think that you should be carrying that alone, by yourself. That's not fair to you, nor is it fair to the client. And I think that that is a great way to bring value to the relationship, to show that you care about the client, to support them, and to also help potentially, if the client is willing and or interested, with, possibly maybe creating some change there.
Right. Right. Yeah. I think your point about just complete positive regard, wanting to be in their corner, showing them that you understand, validating their situation, um, which is very different than just trying to force change upon them through
Right.
fear mongering, through guilt,
Mm.
through shame. Um, that is a, I feel like we've joked about the fact that there's nonviolent communication and there's violent communication. And students when I bring up nonviolent communication, they're like, wait, what's violent communication? This is violent communication. When you threaten people, when you guilt them, when you shame them, and when you make them feel afraid, this is violent communication.
Yeah, you're right.
And
Yeah.
and there's no need for it. There's no need for it because it doesn't build the relationship. It doesn't foster trust. It certainly isn't, they are likely to just stop working with you. It is unlikely that they are just going to be like, this thing that I've been doing for this person that I love, you're right. This is a complete juxtaposition to my goals. Let me stop. Not going to happen. Not going to happen. And so
Never
it,
in the history of like, I don't know if that's ever happened. I should knock on wood because someone's going to message us and be like, actually, it did happen.
yeah, I doubt it. I'd be like, I call your BS. But
Wholesome show. This is a wholesome show, Meg. This is
I didn't
wholesome.
say the words. I didn't
That's
say
true.
the
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, that's
um,
true.
okay. So we've discussed single behavior versus pattern.
Yeah,
We've
yeah, yeah.
discussed, so coming to terms with, we've also discussed in both, even though it wasn't stated explicitly, that it really needs to be the client. The client, we're trying to get
Hmm.
the client to come to their own terms. Whether that is the client decides, look, I fine, move my retirement age to 75. I'm going to continue giving to my kids and I'm not going to
Yeah,
stop.
yeah,
Like that that would be a completely acceptable answer. It's just trying to get to this place where the advisor and the client believe and say the same things instead of one promising to change or one trying to force the change or one trying to belittle something or no, we're just trying to get on the same page. So and in the other situation too, it's trying to help that client see that just because they think, you know, hey, this went well for my friend Tim, my friend Tim, he invested 50 grand and it turned out okay. Cool for Tim. Okay. But you're probably not going to be able to convince, your client of that.
yeah,
And so instead of saying, no, Tim's a one off, like, yeah, right, man. It's better to say, okay, well, let's so we've talked about this before and I feel the need to bring this like nerdiness to it because I think this is such a great technique and it's been actually studied, which I think is so nice. Um, there's what is called SPIES, which stands for subjective probability interval estimation, which and I say this because I want advisors to be able to Google it if they wish to Google it.
love that about you. It is one of my truly like I laugh because it is so nerdy. And it is also one of the things that I love so much about you. But yes, please continue. I'm laughing
I
at
like there to be a thing, it's not
I
just like,
know,
oh,
I know. I love that about you. And that it is we're not just pulling things out of our hiney.
no,
That we
no,
are, yeah.
not
Yeah,
stuff
yeah.
we practice on our kids. This is stuff that has been documented. Um, we also practice it on our kids and
I
our
was gonna
husbands.
say.
Um, okay, so SPIES. So what this does is it kind of expands the probability frame, and so you say to this person, okay, so Tim got out. So best case scenario, Tim, you're going to be just like Tim. You're going to put your money in. 5 years later, you're going to have $200,000. Cool. That's one probability. There's another probability that says you're going to put this money in and you'll never get it back. Maybe it's a lesser probability, still a probability. Maybe there's another probability where actually you put this money in and you get your money back faster and more, also a probability. And so you can play this game, where we get the client to assign probabilities or to talk about various scenarios. If you are one of those financial planners that loves financial planning software and loves to just drum up the little scenarios, this is a great time to be like, this is what it would look like if you got no money back. This is what it would look like if you got some money back slower over the course of 10 years. This is what it would look like if you got, situation same as Tim. This is what it would look like if somehow you did better than Tim. Now, these are all possible. Let's talk about, what's gone wrong and what's gone right in these various situations. Because once again, you're not just saying to the client, no, and you're being their buddy, by helping them to think through all these various scenarios. Because again, we're not just saying no. We're like, well, if you're going to do this, let's really think through it. Um, and I think that comes through, but that doesn't mean you don't get to show your expertise. You do. That doesn't mean you don't get to share your opinions. You do, as still as a part of this, because your opinion just becomes a part of one of the probabilities, and that's fine. But now it's not you against them. It's us against the risk.
Yeah.
And I think that really sets a different tone, but does the exact same thing. And that it's getting the client to think, well, I hadn't thought about that. Well, I didn't actually envision that scenario. Oof, you're
Yeah.
right. This scenario could be this and that. All they're doing now is, once again, sort of verbalizing their ambivalence, verbalizing the fact that they are taking on various perspectives. This helps us with the process of reasoning. It isn't even that they'll get to the end and they may still decide, well, maybe not 50, maybe 30, but they have at least taken into consideration that they might get nothing back. And maybe that's why they went with 30, because they decide, well, I really do want to do this. I care about my friend. I care about this investment. This just sounds really cool. I truly think I have something to give here. I'm excited by this. If I never see the 30 grand again, I'll have learned a
Okay.
lesson.
I
Right?
think what's really, so I used to call this the what if game in therapy,
Okay.
particularly with clients. Now I know that it has an actual real name. So this is also why I'm grateful to you. I used to call it the what if game. Um, what I love about this particular thing that we're talking about here with probabilities is doing this with couples, because what I'm
Mm,
imagining is like you're going through these scenarios, these probabilities, and one partner is like, wait, hey, hold on. I hadn't thought about that one. I don't know about that. Right. And then, the other partner is like, oh, I actually would be okay with that. Like, well, this is interesting.
yeah.
And I think that that is really important, particularly if you're working with a couple. Actually, even if you're just working with an individual who is partnered and married, asking, what do you think your partner would say? Of these, like, how would they feel about some of these probabilities? And just asking and thinking around that, because there is impact, and it's not just in isolation. It's not just to the individual, right? It would impact like their family. But for couples, if you're doing this, I think that it would spark some really important dialogue that they probably haven't had um, at all. And so I really like this as a framework. I really, really like this. I will stop calling it the what if game now.
Well, we can call it the what if game, but we can also call it spies. I always think it sounds fun.
I
Like,
know. I kind of like spies better because um,
I don't know,
it makes me
sounds
think of, yeah, it
James
makes me
Bond.
think of the Spy Museum in DC.
Oh, I've never been to that one.
Dude, field trip. We need to go. It's pretty cool.
I think I would
Uh,
love a good mystery. So,
yeah, right. Yeah. And all the gear. We could save up some money and buy some cool spy gear. We could do a full rebrand.
Carmen Sandiego, I call it.
Yes. Yes. I
Well, I don't
loved.
really know if she was a spy, but she was
Where
everywhere.
in the world was Carmen
San
Sandiego?
Diego? Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. That's okay.
Loved.
New
Loved it.
life goal. Sorry, everybody. This podcast is going to end, and we are now explorers slash.
Full rebrand. Doing a full rebrand now. Uh, I like this. I think that is great. All right, Meg, we've talked about a lot of great things. You summarized us up there kind of earlier before we got into spies. Just to kind of recap us here, you know, this conversation around how to navigate when a client brings a scenario to you, when you need to say, I'll say, we said no is kind of how we framed like the topic, when we need to say no. My hope is that for those of you that are listening, is that the saying no might be your first automatic, like, That's what I need to do. My hope is that maybe after listening to us babble here for 40, 45 minutes, that you realize it's really not about saying no. It's about helping the client come to their own answer. And there's a lot of great conversational tools here that we've talked about: the ask, tell, ask, the SPIES/what if game, unconditional positive regard, understanding the meaning behind it, what's important, how does this connect to their goals. So many great conversational tools here to help you navigate, whether it is a singular, like one-off request, or if it is a behavioral pattern. My hope is that this was helpful for you. Try these out in your conversations. Let us know what you think. Let us know how they go.
If it
Also,
comes, just know that Beyond the Plan exists and we could be in the next conversation with you.
we could be in the next conversation,
We
and
could.
we would love to be
Well,
in the next conversation with you, or to train your team on how to have these conversations in a way that gives you, the advisor, your advisors, more confidence in navigating them. So, with that, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for allowing Meg and I into your ears, into your mind today. And until next time, see ya.